Yo, what is going on, everybody? My name is Alan and this is Project Elevate, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about the gameplay mechanics that need improvement in 2K21, specifically the shooting mechanics and the interplay between the release and contest system. So we're all familiar with whites and missing whites, and there's a lot of hot topic debate right now based on that Mike Wang interview on whether white should go in. He even brought to the point, should it just be green or miss? And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I wanted to show some examples. Like, take a look at this Kobe Bryant shot right here. He goes up. This is GOAT Kobe, 99 mid-range shot, wide open, and he just kind of clanks it. Pretty much a full white there. Did bounce back just a little bit, but and then on the other end, of course, contested layup, and it just goes in 55%. Somehow, it seems like it should have been more contested than that. How you calculate those, that's a different topic, and there's going to be an example later on that kind of brings that to point. And of course, a late goes in. And then here's the situation at the end of a different game, close game in fourth quarter. He makes a contested early shot. On the other end, wide open, white, miss. And then at the very end of the game here, I had him in the corner. That's Rocco. And he just clanks that. Open white. I get the steal. Kind of worked for my shot again. Go in, draw the defense, kick out to Dino. He shoots it, open white, and then on the other end, here we go. And look how contested this shot is. And he's just kind of in the vicinity, but doesn't make really contact, doesn't affect the animation at all. He's just kind of there, he kind of goes by it. And then very end of the game, last chance for this Evo'd Kobe. And he misses the white. Again, 21% contest, and look how far he is when I actually get into my motion, and then by the time I release it, he's still kind of sliding into the vicinity, but barely there. And that's a 21% contest. So I made this tier list, I put it together, and we're gonna get into kind of how it feels like and how it should work. Let's jump into that. All right, guys, so I put together this tier list for shooting mechanics. So basically it's a combination of release and coverage. And let's go ahead and talk about how it feels like right now. It's probably not like this when you look at the code, but this is kind of what the impression is, what you kind of feel like when you're actually playing the game. All right, so pretty much it feels when it actually gives you the excellent indicator, then you're actually getting it, even though sometimes you get those straight arms. All right, so pretty much all the excellent releases, they go in all the time. And I'm not sure if you can get an excellent release when you're this covered, but I'm gonna put it in there for the sake of just being there. All right, so then it basically feels like this. So the tiers here, we have 100% most of the time, which would be like 75% or higher. This is like a 50-50 coin flip, so anywhere from like 45 to 55, 60%. Here, a little bit in between, so maybe like a 25% to 35% chance. Here, super rarely would be like 5 to 10%, and then never is never. Okay, so this is kind of how it feels like, I think. You have all your excellent releases up here, 100%. And then basically you have this that seems like it goes in like about 50-50. Then you have it all. It's funny because it almost feels like these go in most of the time, but they're actually above, the whites, which is crazy. And then pretty much it seems like you have your slightly wide open, that's like in the same tier as this. You have your slightly covered, which is like in the same tier as this. You have your late covered, which is like in the same tier as this, or someone would argue that it almost feels like it goes up even most of the time. It's up here, We'll put it in here just for the sake of dramatic. Okay, so here, about 50-50. Then you have here the late and contested, which probably feels like around here somewhere. You have the white contested, which feels like around here. You have your very late contested, which feels around here. You have your very late slightly contested, right around there. You have your very late wide open that feels like right around here. And then you have this one, which depending, if it's like a layup, it feels like it's like way up here or even way up here. If it's a outside shot, then it's I don't know if it's super rarely. It might be here in super rare. It might also be here. We're gonna put it here just for the sake of giving them the benefit of the doubt. So this is kind of what it feels like when you're playing the game. Not necessarily what it is in the coding if you look at it, which obviously none of us have access to that, but that's kind of what it feels like. All right, guys, so let's take a little look and take some time to talk about how shooting should be. Now, obviously, there has been some talk. There's that Mike Wang interview out there where he's talking about should only greens go in and everything else miss. Okay, so let's look at how that would look like, basically. Okay, so basically, we're talking about it would be here, your greens, all your greens, and then everything else would be here. Okay, so just by looking at any tier list out there, we can clearly see this would be a bad idea. For one thing, when you do something like this, you're taking everything out of the equation. So defense, you're taking out attributes essentially, you're taking everything out. There's much more to the game than just stick timing on jump shots. That's one aspect of the game. And yes, you may be phenomenal, and to be a top tier comp player, you have to have that part of the game, but you also have to have defensive IQ, you have to have offensive IQ, you have to know how to get your good shots, you have to understand your personnel and who can take those good shots. There's so much more that goes into a basketball. There's a whole talk about, fun versus realistic, and that's another video that I've had on the, literally on a little sticky on my computer for like a month or two. We'll get to that, but just from a shooting mechanic standpoint, this tier list here looks crazy unbalanced. And if anybody made like a tier list like best point guards in the game, and they made a tier list like this, it would just be like laughed off like the internet. You know what I mean? So let's get this out of the table. This is a much more complex discussion on shot mechanics than just, hey, time it, you're green, you make it. You don't green it, you miss it. Okay, so this is where it's up to debate, and this is something that I've done on stream. Go follow me on Twitch, links down in the description, and have these conversations about the game. And I think that the way we make the game better is by having a lot of discussions. So I'm actually calling out all the big content creators. During like the middle of 2K21, when we have like a grasp of what the game feels like, especially after we get a good feel for next gen, I'm calling for them to get together and have these discussions and like have a roundtable discussions on somebody's stream. They can all stream it, they can all make videos on their channels or whatnot, but we gotta have people that are like ingrained in the community, giving the developers that feedback and having those discussions, and then opening the dialogue with the devs so that we have a better game for us all. It's really that simple. That's how things get done. Have discussions, talk about it. All right, so let's jump into how I feel that jump shot timing versus coverage should kind of work. So excellent, open should definitely always go in. Excellent and slightly should always definitely go in. Excellent and covered, I think, should always go in as well. A small caveat is that I feel that the window should get a little bit smaller, and I believe it does in the algorithm, but the window should get a little bit smaller as you time it better, Now, excellent and heavy contested, or like 100% contested, I still think this should be most times. The window should be really, really small, and if you hit it, I think it should go in most of the time, but not every single time. You got to reward the defense a little bit. There's two sides of skill gap, right? It's how well you can contest and how well you can time your shot. You know, so somebody can get like a perfect release timing, super contested. I think it should still go in majority of the time, but hey, leave that little sliver of like, hey, it may not go in. Okay, some people might not like that. Some people might say, hey, if I green it, it should go in all the time. There's a tiny bit of randomness that is okay, as long as you have clear absolutes in the equation, you know? Okay, so let's go down to the never section, and I think that very early 100% smothered should obviously never go in. And I will actually argue that like a late smothered like this should also never go in. If you're like that off on your timing and you get a really good contest, I think that it's fair to, you know, not let that shot have a chance of going in. And this is for layups and outside shots and everything, you know, like you got to have that separation. That's kind of what leads to the frustration, I think, is that people get the impression that it's all up to the game's algorithm. It's all up to whatever the dice roll is. You got to have a little bit of separation so that the middle ground can have that randomization and you're okay with it. You know what I mean? You have your 100%, you're like, okay, I earned that. You have you're like, hey, it's not going to happen. And you're like, okay, you earned that. You know, I messed up on the release. You got a good contest. I'm good with that, you know? Now the middle part. The middle part is where it gets interesting. And this is where I wanted to separate this a little bit. So we have our dice roll, basically our coin flip situations in the 50%, you know, B category here. And again, that can be like 45 to 55, 60%. I guess I should have put percentages on all the tiers. Okay, so let's work our way from the bottom. In the super rarely, I think that if you get like a covered and you're like very late on it, especially like something like this, very late and like a solid cover, it should very rarely go in. You gotta reward the skill there. You have to reward, you know, penalize the super off timing on stuff, and that should really not go in. Okay, so very late, wide open. You're wide open, you got a good shot, you just totally smoked the release. I'm okay with this being here. And again, this caveat is like, this C category is like, maybe like a 15 to 30% chance, you know, like maybe like a third or below, something like that, where it's not gonna go in, you know, it's gonna miss more than not, but you still have a decent shot. So you worked for your open shot, but you messed up the release. Okay, so here we have a contest, a heavy contest, and a slightly. So you timed it well. They got a very solid contest. This should be towards the bottom end here. And I guess I'll put these in categories as to like how, you know, these middle categories, I guess, should be like if they fall in the upper range of the percentage range or towards the bottom. So here we go, slightly early and a solid contest. So we're actually gonna put this one here. Okay, so like a late and a slight contest. I think that should be like in front of this one. Let's move that over here. So this should be like towards the top end of that, like closer to 33%. Okay, a late and a solid contest. I think that should be down here, towards the bottom end of that. I mean, you messed up the release. We got a solid contest. Let's reward that. You have a shot, depending on badges, ratings, etc. But you know, you're not going to get it most of the time. Okay, slightly with a solid contest. I think that should be like a coin flip. Slightly with a light contest. I think that should be here towards the top. So actually this one's gonna come here to the front. So this one's gonna be more like 55-60% chance, which if you look at percentages of real life shooters, that is a great percentage. I'm scaling that because, you know, this is a video game. We're playing 5-minute quarters. We're not playing 12-minute quarters. So I think getting a percentage like that where it's a, you know, higher chance of doing it than not, you know, 60%, 55% range, that kind of works out. Okay, slightly wide open. This is where a lot of people will contest, like, hey, you didn't green it, you know? But I think this should go in most of the time. You worked for a shot. You were really close to getting that perfect release. This should go in most of the time. And I think this is what's so frustrating, is that when something like this, a late covered is in the same category, it seems like, which is probably like down here in a coin flip situation, it's very frustrating to see your opponent grab one of, make one of these and then you miss a slightly wide open shot, So that separation there between those is so important. So I think this one early, wide open, this should be a coin flip as well. And let's see, should this be, these are almost the same, but I'm gonna leave them in this this order here, where slightly is first, then slightly solid covered, and then early wide open. Okay, so let's just make sure that our tiers are pretty, pretty open here. And, I would be, these you can flip flop and they're gonna go in most of the time anyway. I'm not gonna, nitpick over which one should go first here in the A tier. As far as the C tier, okay, so we have a late, almost not covered at all. That should probably go in more than anything else. Very late, wide open, down there, slightly with a solid cover. I want to reward the defense, so I want this to go in less than something like this. And this there, so I think C tier is good in the tier within the tier, so to speak. As far as here, very late, slightly covered. That could be maybe like closer to 10%. This one here may be closer to 5%, and then here it's just never, so it doesn't really matter. So I think this is a much more balanced kind of like tier list of how the shot contest and release, interplays, and how that should translate into a made or miss shot. Let me know what you guys think of this. There's a lot to be discussed. If you disagree, let me know why. Pop into the stream, let me know why. I'm not the end all be all of this by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just trying to put a little logic and like real life basketball kind of like scenarios into the game where it's still fun. But the most important thing, I think that there's some type of order and consistency that we kind of understand. If they're too close together, if there's no separation between the tiers, there's no separation between a slightly wide open shot and a late, solid cover shot, if that feels like it's like in the same tier list, like that's what really, leads to that no skill gap, where it's just too random. When, very early some others have a chance of going in, it's like, okay, what, why? And then on the flip side, if you have everything up at the top and then everything up all the way at never, that's just broken too. Like that's gonna lead to a whole nother like set of problems that I don't think that's what we really want. Some of the really comp players might say, hey, I want that because they understand that their ability to green their shots is gonna really make it easy for them to win. But again, that's one part of the equation. That's literally just learning how to time jump shots. That's important, but so is defense, so is working an open shot, so is basketball IQ, so is a host of other things. And I feel like if we have that clear separation between the tiers, between a slightly open shot and a late, solid contest shot, then everybody's gonna be like more willing to accept those separations, Anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. My name is Alan. This is Project Elevate. Till next time, elevate your grind, game, yourselves, and each other. Peace.